want to introduce two people really quickly. John Blakely in the back of the room is the principal of the high school, of the elementary school. Welcome, everyone. And Miss Sean Spencer Hester is the coordinator of the Neighborhood Watch Group. Now I'd like to introduce the mayor of Lynchburg, Michael Gillette.
Good evening, everybody. I apologize. My voice is much better tonight than it was at last night's city council meeting. It was great. It was. So I apologize, but I do have a little bit of a cold. I'm going to let Steve actually introduce our Attorney General in just a minute, but I just wanted to come up for a brief second. I don't want to eat up too much time. Just to say how happy we are to have our Attorney General Herring here with us this evening. I have been tremendously proud of the work that he has done as our Attorney General. I think he really has continually worked to advance the interests of all of our citizens in Lynchburg across all sorts of different divides and diversities, and I appreciate his work very, very much. And it has just been a pleasure. He and I met probably just as he was getting ready to work 4 years ago, but I want to welcome him to the city. I hope that you will come back often. And if there's anything we can do in Lynchburg to help you advance your agenda down in Richmond, we certainly want to be there to help you do that. So I'm not going to give a formal bio or any of that because I think you already have that information, and I don't want to steal anyone's thunder, but I did just want to give an official welcome on behalf of the city. And I'm joined in doing that tonight with a couple of my fellow council members. Councilmember Trenae Tweedy is right here in the front of the room. Councilmember Randy Nelson is in the back of the room over there. Don't see any other city council members. But I do see one of our previous mayors, Carl Hutcherson, is in the room as well. So thank you all.
I also want to take note of a couple of longtime Neighborhood Watch supporters that are in the room tonight. Tonight we have our Commonwealth Attorney, Michael Doucette, with us. And we also have the head of the Lynchburg City Schools, Dr. Brabant. I can't thank you enough for coming out tonight to join us for this special Neighborhood Watch meeting. We're excited to have Mark Herring with us. He became the 48th Attorney General for Virginia on January 11th, 2014. And since then, he's been working to keep Virginia families safe in their communities and neighborhoods, providing legal services to the Commonwealth agencies, boards, commissions, college, and universities. He's fighting for justice, equality, and opportunity for all Virginians. We're very excited to have him here in the Hill City. He's here as part of a public safety tour across the state. I'd like for everybody to welcome our Attorney General, Mark Herring.
Thank you very much. Well, good evening, everyone, and thank you very much for the introduction. And it is great to be back in Lynchburg. You know, when he said the Hill City, it reminded me one time when I was here a few years ago for the Lynchburg 10-miler. I know why it's the Hill City after running those 10 miles in Lynchburg. But it's great to be back, and thank you for letting me join you for your Neighborhood Watch meeting. I was incredibly impressed when I heard you all have like 63 Neighborhood Watch programs in Lynchburg, and I think that's fantastic and shows the level of engagement that you all have with your law enforcement community. The reason I came to Lynchburg, this is a part of my third annual public safety tour. Each year I've gone on a public safety tour around the state so that I can hear firsthand from local law enforcement, local prosecutors like Mike, and from citizens about public safety challenges that you all are facing every day in your communities and how I, as Attorney General, can help support your efforts. And a few of the issues that we're working on in the Attorney General's office, and some of them have come out of these public safety meetings. One of the things I heard a lot about in my first one 2 years ago was how heroin and prescription drug overdoses were a significant and a growing problem in so many communities all across the state. And as a response to that, we have stepped up our prosecutions, partnering with Commonwealth's attorneys and U.S. attorneys' offices to try to go after the dealers and the traffickers, while at the same time recognizing it is a public health crisis that requires a really robust education effort and prevention effort and treatment efforts, and we are working as hard as we can in all of those areas. We're also working on domestic violence prevention. And one of the things that, as a state senator, that I had worked hard on, and that once I became Attorney General I was able to just implement, it was to try to promote lethality assessment protocols in communities around the state. Now, lethality assessment protocols, that's a mouthful, but really what it means is working with local first responders so that when they come on to a scene of domestic violence, that they're able to talk with the victim to see if the victim might be at risk of further victimization and help to direct them to local services in the community to help keep them safe and keep them from being victimized again. A couple of other things that we're working on that were a part of some of these public safety meetings involves trying to make 21st century policing training more widely available to law enforcement across the state. I heard from a lot of law enforcement about how important this training was so that they can learn or have the most current and most up-to-date training on how to de-escalate situations, on professionalism, on recognizing implicit bias, because we all have biases, but what we want to do is make sure that we can recognize them and make sure that they don't interfere with important decision-making and judgments. And so while a lot of larger departments are already doing this training, I heard that smaller and mid-sized departments didn't have the resources to do it. So we're starting those kinds of trainings regionally around the state. These are train the trainer programs so that some officers from different departments can receive the training and go back to their agencies and help train others in their agencies. And I know Lynchburg, Buena Vista, and some other departments in the area have already undertaken that. And so we want to help support and supplement that. And another area is in increasing minority recruitment in law enforcement. And some of the police chiefs I've spoken with, for example, in Martinsville and in Danville, have worked really hard in this area, but haven't seen the kinds of results that they're really looking for. They're almost majority minority communities, and yet they have only a handful of minority officers despite those efforts. And so they reached out to us. We are doing surveys right now to see what the barriers are to that recruitment, and we are working with them to remove those barriers. And once that's done, then we're going to take what we've learned and put together a model policy so that other departments around the state who want to increase minority recruitment have a tool that they can use and tailor to fit their locality. So those are just a few of the things that we're working on in the Attorney General's office. I don't want to talk too much because I really am here to listen and see what you all are doing in terms of community policing here in Lynchburg, in terms of citizen engagement, because that is such an important part of keeping and building safe, successful communities. It really requires a lot of proactive communication in order to build that trust and keep, protect the community and keep it safe. And so I'm really here to kind of observe. I'm impressed with the number of neighborhood watch meetings and neighborhood watch organizations you all have, and I want to thank you for letting me be a part of this. So thanks for having me.
I see several neighborhood watch groups represented here tonight. I also see church members here tonight and community activists. The R.S. Payne neighborhood watch in particular that's taken place here has been driven by Ms. Shawn Spencer Hester. And could I put you on the spot just a little bit? She is a community activist extraordinaire. She has done so much in this community. I just want you to, the Neighborhood Watch was just one of many things that you've done in the community in order to bring the community together and strengthen the community. She's the granddaughter, is that correct, of Ann Spencer, famous poet. She has the museum down here on Pierce Street to honor her grandmother. Each year in the fall, she has the Harlem Renaissance Festival here in Lynchburg, and this is year number 5, going into number 5. So that's been a great community event. She's working on several other projects to buff up some historical sites within the Pierce Street area. And she serves on boards and commissions and more than I ever know. But tell us just a little bit about what your goal is.
Oh gosh, is to make it a safe place, because we all want a safe place to live, and a clean environment, someplace where we know our neighbors again, and not just neighbors, but also our businesses, that we have a connection with that, and maybe even to build back up that African-American business community that used to be on, even not just African-American, used to be on 12th Street. Mr. I can't think of his name, Carl, that had a grocery store there on 12th Street for a long time, and he used to delivers groceries and bicycles. I think that we can still do that, you know. So that's really all I ask for. It's not much. It's just you know, make it a safe place, and we have these really 2 great schools in this community, R.S. Payne and Dunbar, which is just right up the street. You know, so when the kids are walking to school or riding their bike to school, that they're safe getting there and they're safe getting home. But we have to get to know each other again in order for all that to happen. It all starts with knowing who your neighbor is, and being aware of what's going on in your neighborhood, whether it's drugs or domestic violence or just somebody that just needs a hand up, and being able to do that. So that's all I ask for. It's something that doesn't cost anything from anybody. It's just time that you give to your community. And everybody should give a little bit.
I'm glad that we could have it tonight at R.S. Payne's. In particular, this Neighborhood Watch is a relatively new Neighborhood Watch to the program. But it's doing some things that I haven't seen in a while. Sean and Mr. John Blakely, principal of the school here, pretty much live in this community 24/7. And they do some unique things as far as trying to get people involved in the Neighborhood Watch. It is nothing out of the ordinary to see these 2 walking down the street, going door to door, and not just Neighborhood Watch, but checking on neighbors and doing all kinds of things, like Sean said, strengthening the community. And Neighborhood Watch isn't all about crime prevention. I love to see communities come together and neighbors meeting neighbors. We have meetings, and you know, I'm an employee of the city, but every Neighborhood Watch I go to, I feel more like part of the family. And we have open discussions, and I like that about Neighborhood Watch. And I like that sense of community that comes back. And I have Neighborhood Watch members here that have just been really good to me and opened up their communities and opened up themselves to me as a member of the police department, but as a trusted source. And I appreciate that, and I appreciate the communication that we have going back and forth. Part of the purpose of the meeting tonight is for y'all to be able to ask and get answers to questions that you have about things that we're doing here in the Hill City, whether it be Neighborhood Watch or crime prevention, community policing. Mr. Herring is here too and can answer questions. We have several members of the police department here that are available to answer questions. So I want to open it up to you, the community, to know what y'all have to think, what y'all have to say, and what any questions you might have.
Now, is the program to have officers work with various churches still in place or progressing at this point?
Yes, sir. We have our Faith Watch program in place that's about 7 months old now. And from the crime prevention side of it, we've done security assessments at 25 churches. And we have a monthly meeting with inner city pastors that we've been doing that's about almost a year into it now. And every time we turn around, there's more churches coming on board with that. Pastor Hutcherson back there is part of that group. And it's just a great partnership with our community members. It's something new for Lynchburg. And as I'm part of it, I really enjoy it. I love meeting with the church members just as much as I do Neighborhood Watch. And Carl, thank you for that. Putting in a little plug.
First Tuesday of each month.
First Tuesday at Living Word Ministry. And We've been having it at Living Word Ministries on Taylor Street. The eventual goal is to move around to various churches throughout the city. What else?
Can you talk about maybe about the policing in the neighborhoods? And I know that is a concern with the police department increasing the presence and the police department, getting to know the neighborhoods that they're in as well, and when they have downtime, spending more time into the neighborhoods.
Okay, I'm gonna let Major Stokes answer that question. He's our deputy chief.
Make sure I heard a question about how we're trying to target or move towards a more neighborhood and community-based policing initiative. Yes. One of the things that Chief Diaz charged us with is coming up with a way to enhance our community policing, and one really good way of doing that is having officers assigned to a particular area so that they work that consistently. As you know, or may or may not know, we're working 12-hour shifts now. Not only is that not the best shift as far as health for officers, but it's also not as conducive towards community policing. You can read a number, unfortunately, if you read the Ferguson, Missouri DOJ report, you'll find in there it's mentioned how detrimental 12-hour shifts were to their community policing efforts. And we all know what happened when they were not in touch well with their community in that area. Fortunately, we're not that community. So a lot of the initiatives that we're pushing forward with is we have realigned where the officers are working, trying to make the area that they work in, that they are assigned to, smaller, so that they have less responsibility, so that they can get to know that, if I have to drive for miles and miles between, what my boundaries, then I don't have the opportunity as much to get to know the neighborhood. So smaller areas that we're responsible for, and we're looking at the shift structure to see, is there something that we can do differently that will be an enhancement to community policing. Now, we're really working through that. That's not something you kind of flip a light switch on and kind of do something different, but we are looking at, we're looking at how can we really shore up patrol the police officers and make sure that there's enough people there. Also, another thing that we're examining closely is a community action team. In other words, is there a particular problem in a neighborhood that we need to put more than the normal, I guess you would say, more than just the patrol officers in that are working there to address. And they will move about to address problems, look for problems, and help those neighborhoods solve those problems when they pop up. Kind of the hot spots, as we call them in our profession. Does that answer what you were?
Can you tell us what the hot spots are?
Yes. Unfortunately, crime hotspots tend to generally follow. Crime is a socioeconomic issue, so it unfortunately tends to follow some of the areas where we see higher poverty. So we really kind of, where 12th and Fort, right in that area, start to divide right there in the midtown. We're seeing a lot of crime, unfortunately, a lot of gang activity, particularly concentrated down 12th Street towards this neighborhood, kind of towards Diamond Hill, up in that area as well. Of course, White Rock still has some issues that we need to work on, and then it creeps on up Rivermont Avenue, lower end of Rivermont as well. So it kind of in that T shape, I guess you would say. And now, of course, we have different crime when you go out towards Ward Road and Candler's Mountain Road. So we have lots of property crime, shoplifting out in that area that we're having to deal with. But the unfortunate circumstance of violent crime and some related or some property crime as well is kind of in that T-shaped or Y-shaped area right there that I kind of described. Again, that's also, council looked at poverty here recently. If you followed that as well, that unfortunately follows kind of that same general area. And it's been well documented that crime kind of relates to poverty and the situation people unfortunately find themselves in. So that's what we need to work with council on is if we feel like we can find a way to address poverty, then we might also be able to address crime as well and reduce violent crime. Gangs, that's always a concern, kind of also follow that. We see a lot of concentration down 12th Street as far as where we know gangs are operating, as it were, that kind of down that 12th Street corridor seems to be a more favored area, but they are spread out as well within that Y and some other areas as well. So that's where we are today, and again, looking to partner to try and find the root of the problem. That's one of the other initiatives that we have as well. Sociologists will say that when you study who commits crime, it's 6% of the 6% of the offenders, are committing 90% of the crime. So we want to target those offenders who are committing the most crime, causing us the most problem, and not take that kind of shotgun approach, kind of policing, and really intelligently look at who are the offenders, who do we need to really arrest and get off the streets and protect those neighborhoods. Anything else that maybe I can answer? Or
Yeah. What can, excuse me, what can we or you do about the landlords who rent these houses to people who move in, destroy the property in the neighborhood? They move out, get evicted at 12, about 2 more people coming in, and it's the same kind of people.
the council has looked at that as well. Lynchburg has a little higher than average, I believe, home as people that are renting rather than necessarily. And what we find is exactly what you say, is that they don't have that connection to the neighborhood because they don't own the home, and they're a little more transient. Yeah, that's something I think that council has tried to work with economic development, or excuse me, community development, and finding what sort of let's see, what's the word I'm looking for? The inspections and those sorts of things, those regulations that we can use to control what's going on in those rental properties.
Don't you think that the landlords have some responsibility as well?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that there should be some guidelines should the landlords impose on the people who are renting these houses, and not just that they could go in and destroy, and then they patch them up, and the next one moves in at 2 o'clock.
Yeah, we've tried to do a lot of work with the apartment complex managers, and that's maybe one area that we could improve a little bit, is trying to identify who are owning. A lot of people don't own a particular apartment complex, but they'll own a number of properties throughout the city, and trying to identify who those are is maybe one area that we can try to work. Again, we're talking about this community action team. That may be one of the charges for them as we get them up running, is identifying who are the major rental property owners and starting to work with them. One of the unfortunate circumstances is that a number of the properties are absentee landlords. In other words, they're living in another state. So it even becomes even more difficult to hold them responsible or have some accountability there. Zoning is the word I was looking for that escaped me. But yeah, using some of those ordinances in zoning and inspection to enforce having a livable neighborhood. Yes.
Yeah, I want to piggyback on that because I've been involved with some situations where we have the absentee landlord, and it's not just absentee landlords, out of state. We have our state attorney general here. This is a huge problem for us, that when we have property owners out of state, they're out of reach of the local codes and ordinances and even, I guess, state law, unless our governor wants to talk to the governor of another state and say, let's do something or go after people. I'm under the impression, Mr. Doucette, that in order to enforce building codes and rental codes and the residency codes, we can do that with residents in state, but if they're out of state, it's really beyond reach. And is that the case, and is there something that can be done?
Excuse me, don't you have to comply to Virginia laws if you are out of state? If you own property in Virginia, don't you have to comply to Virginia
Yes,
laws?
they still have to comply with the zoning ordinances that we have in place.
But in terms of enforcement,
Right. Well, I think what he's trying to get at is these are generally minor, I won't say minor, they are misdemeanor offenses, and therefore we can't bring somebody from Maryland to Lynchburg because they own a home here and extradite them on that crime. That's just not something that is allowed, quite frankly, by the law. So what we unfortunately seem to see is I own a home here and it's not meeting zoning regulations in Lynchburg or this area, and almost abandon it. And we don't need that either, because then we end up with an abandoned property, and it takes time to go through the process for the city to take that property and then address the problems, and of course the whole time it's beginning to deteriorate. So maybe that's an area is shoring up that the Attorney General might think about. Can we shore up ways for local government to be able to address properties that become deteriorated, and because I just don't know that it's practical to basically drag a guy back here from another state to address the zoning law that they have violated. Is there a better way to do that? And maybe it's through the city or the locality being able to take action a little quicker than we have in the past. That's something maybe we can think about.
And I'd like to respond a little bit to all the comments that have been made, in the sense that, first of all, I suffer from the impediment of being a lawyer. And as a lawyer, we tend to think like lawyers, which means we don't think like regular folks. We think in very sort of straight lines. There's traditional enforcement, and then there's some non-traditional ways of getting things done. And as the Attorney General is here to learn what's going on in our particular neighborhoods, I'm learning, so I'm not saying I'm new to the idea of absentee landlords, but it's not a simple problem. There is the enforcement problem, especially when you have someone from out of state. There is the problem of the vacant homes and winding up, if we do something where the person winds up abandoning the home, now it's even worse than it was before, so we have problems. I'm not saying that these problems can't be addressed, though. I think they can be addressed. I think we need to take a very overall viewpoint of it, and beyond just traditional enforcement, look at some other ways to deal with it. And the laws dealing with public nuisances are not easy to deal with. They're difficult to deal with. And so maybe that's something that we can look at is from not only from a city point of view as to how can we use the existing laws dealing with nuisances and which is basically civil lawsuits, basically saying you shall fix this property up or we shall take it away from you, absentee landlord. But there may be some opportunities through legislative action and enrichment to make the use of nuisance laws or new nuisance laws more amenable to the problems of urban environments where we have absentee landlords, especially when they're out of state, and sort of compelling them not only from an enforcement point of view, but from if you don't do it right, we will take your property, a civil point of view.
And there's trade-offs on that. So absolutely, that's a way to attack the problem of an absentee landlord. But think about the person who actually may have owned the home, or it's been a family home, and they're, again, we unfortunately have a poverty rate here in the city that is a little more than we would like. So we have a person who's in poverty, and then then they're not able to keep their home up. So there are things, we need to think about that too. And we just don't want people to be out on the street because your house looks like we don't, it doesn't meet our zoning requirements, and we're going to kick you out, and now you're in a worse situation just because we enacted laws to control an absentee landlord. So it's all a balance and trying to deal with problems in neighborhoods or issues in neighborhoods that are, and sustaining those neighborhoods. We really want to go after those absentee landlords who are a pain to us, but we don't want to overburden citizens who own homes here too with zoning ordinances that they can't comply with, that they don't have the means to comply with because of the situation that they find themselves in.
Does the police department keep a manifest child, a list or something of how many times you come to a resident? We can be lying in bed and it's like Chuck Connor's on the rifleman. We don't know where the boom, boom, boom is coming from, but we can hear it.
Yes, ma'am, certainly. Yes, in fact, we look at on a regular basis so that we know what areas we need to concentrate on. Yes, sir.
I'm Jason Tyree with the City of Lynchburg. My job is that headache y'all just described, trying to track down these landlords that are absentees and trying to get them to fix up their property. One of the issues that I feel deeply with, because I much love the city like y'all, I have an issue with sometimes we'll get a complaint from a neighbor about the absentee landlord who hasn't painted their property, but the one next to it also hasn't been painted because they like them, they're friends, they know the neighborhood, they don't want to get them in trouble, but the absentee landlord, he's collecting rent, he needs to have it. And my view of thinking is, well, if we're going to do that, everybody needs to have it. We don't need to be selective, we don't need to have that. But unfortunately, the way our office works is we work on complaints only. So a lot of times, if we get a complaint on that absentee landlord, that's who we go after. But really, it should be holistically, in a perfect world. But a lot of people can't put food on the table. What am I going to do? Feed my kids or paint my house? I'm going to feed my kids. So when you think about that, I know from a landlord situation, oh, well, they're collecting rent. Well, sometimes they're not. Sometimes, they have 6 or 7 properties. Some people are living there for free. Sometimes they are collecting rent. Sometimes they are slumlords. But a lot of times there's a bigger picture to it that we don't always get to see. So that's something that you really have to keep in your mind when you think about things like that. Let's try to look at the bigger picture and picking up the community itself holistically, not just picking out certain people or certain, because, oh, they rent, they're getting money, they need to fix that up. Well, everybody needs to do that. We need to lift the community up together. So, hey, Miss Arlie.
Jason's been to my house several times. And my daughter lived directly across from me. She's moved out now and is at my house. She has multiple sclerosis. And we had stuff in sheds that we were getting rid of. And one was a trailer. You saw it.
Yes, ma'am.
Very nice trailer. But years ago, my brother, when he left the Air Force in Alaska, he and my daddy put it in from the alleyway. They used to could come from one end to the other, but the church put up, what do you call those things? It's like
the barriers, the big metal barriers. Yeah.
Okay, so you can only come up one way. And the people behind my daughter's house, they have packed up, you saw it, you got pictures. I mean, up almost to the top of the garage and refused to move it. So when she moved out, the man that wanted to buy it, we couldn't even sell it to him.
That's right.
And he had been taking care of the yard until the house was sold. But we never, it's still there.
That's right.
Because we can't get it out. And the city can't do anything about it, evidently.
Yeah, that's one of those issues. With the neighbor has cleaned up some of it, but the way it goes is it's on a property lot, and half of it technically belongs to your daughter, the other half to
It's
the
an
other.
alleyway. We have never
is.
even put our foot
Well,
back there.
it's not. It's one of the alleyways. You're right. When the church was built in, the city actually closed it off, so it's actually technically not an alley anymore. It's all personal property. It's not a city. It's one of those things. But on that case, it was sent to the people who handled the bulk pickup to get it. I don't know if because they have the machine with the claw, and I'm not sure if it was able to be picked up or not.
I haven't seen anything go.
Okay.
It's
So,
still.
You know, neighborhood sustainability is one of council's priorities for the city, and that includes us, that includes folks with community development, and you know, we need to know about these things, and again, we have to act within the law, because that's what the law is there for, to guide us and how we control what's going on in neighborhoods, quote unquote. So we don't want to step on anybody's rights, and we want to make sure that we do things the correct way. And sometimes, you know, it's not always as easy as it might seem. Other questions?
Okay. Well, one announcement for Neighborhood Watch. Each year we have an annual Neighborhood Watch partnership meeting, which is coming up very soon, Monday the 21st. I have some flyers up here at the front of the room, so you don't have to write it down. But it's going to be at the public library at 6 p.m. This is like the city's State of the Union address for Neighborhood Watch. We tell you everything that's going on in the city, crime stats for 2015, the whole 9 yards. We have a question and answer session with our command staff. This year, by popular demand, our animal control warden, Todd Jones, will be there. And he's prepared to answer some questions as well. As always, we will have refreshments, and I do my best to provide the best door prizes in the city of Lynchburg. So please join us for the partnership meeting on the 21st, and I thank you very much for your support of
Can I just say something?
Yes.
The partnership meeting is such a wonderful meeting. I just wish more people would turn out and participate. It gets better all the time. And Stephen does a wonderful job, and I would just like for the neighborhoods to really emphasize how important it is to meet. We're going to meet the police chief. We're going to meet all the police officers. We get to know them. And it's a time to really step up and talk about your community and ask questions to the patrolmen who go through your neighborhood. Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you.
I'd like to make an announcement about that you sent about the litter cleanup event.
Yes, yes.
Which is on March the 19th. Some of you have it on, I made copies, from 9 to 12 noon. Everyone is invited to participate. It's the 18th.
What time?
It's March the 19th from 9 to 12.
It's the annual March on Litter.
March on Litter, and the event will begin at the Public Works Department at 1700 Memorial Avenue. That will be the new meetup location, and each participant will receive a cleanup location, safety vest, orange trash bags, and refreshments. They like to feed you. If you want to volunteer, you can call 455-4450, or you can just meet at the Public Works Department.
Thank you, Sean.
Will that include our whole block area, our whole neighborhood watch area?
Public Works asks that anybody that's interested, there's a number to call, and anybody who wants to participate, if Fair Street, if RS Payne wants to participate, we just need one person from each watch group to call in and say that this is going to be a location, and then that morning everybody's going to gather together and then go out to the neighborhoods.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Do you have any closing thoughts?
Well, again, I want to thank you for letting me observe your meeting and be a part of it. I was just sitting here kind of making some observations, and you know, one thing I'm really impressed with, you all reminded me of why I got involved in public service to begin with. You all care deeply about your community, and you care for one another and for your neighbors. And I'm really glad to have been here and been a part of it. Also want you to know, the day in Lynchburg has been great, and it's great to be back. I spent some time at the training academy, and the folks there are providing a lot of great training for new recruits. I had an opportunity to meet and speak briefly with a lot of those new recruits, and I was at a meeting earlier this afternoon and heard from Chief Diaz give a presentation about how he's working so hard to encourage the officers in the department to get out as much as they can in the community. And I just think it's fantastic what you all have going on. Mayor Gillette, it's great to see you again, and thank you so much for letting me be a part of your meeting.
Thank you all for coming tonight. I have flyers up here at the front for our partnership meeting. Yes, Mr. Stamps.
I would like to acknowledge Greater Peace of Zion Baptist Church. They came tonight because I asked, and I told them it's something we should participate in. We are located on 16th of Fillmore. So, thank y'all for
And we
coming.
meet every second Thursday, right here in this library at 6 o'clock, our Payne Neighborhood Watch Group. So if you're interested in coming back, we would love to have you.
Please do.
And we would love to have you as part of our Faith Watch program as well.
Thank you.
Amen. Second Tuesday.